Now, we are in a precarious state, one might say. We're trying to land this lander on Moho. However, we're running into the issue of we should have still had a huge fuel tank by now, being able to slow us down the rest of the way to actually land, and we would ditch that fuel tank slightly above the surface, which would allow us to, still land safely away from wherever that sucker would actually hit the surface of Moho. But, still have enough to slow us down, so we're not actually using up all of our fuel here. But that is looking very unlikely. We want to take our solar panels and fold them in, because you don't want to really try to land on any type of surface with the suckers out, because they will break off fairly easily. They're very fragile. But the shot of the sun going down behind Moho is probably the best foreseeing that you can see as far as our fortune is concerned. It is sun setting. We probably are going to be stuck here on Moho. We'll see if we can actually even get off of the planet once we collect our science, but that is definitely something to consider, once we've already done our landing. The landing is the first part that we need to do, and I want to land on the side of Moho that has sunlight on it, because Moho is a pretty fortuitous structure as far as the actual planet surface is concerned. There's a lot of mountains, I would say, is a good way to put it. They're kind of hilly, and you will more often than not land on a strange angle. There are some flat spots, but they are hard to find, and it's even harder to find if you're landing at night. So what we're doing here is we really want to just land somewhere where we can, not tip over. We have a pretty tall craft in general. A lot of that's because we have the two big fuel tanks and the nuclear engines, which are tall to begin with, and then we have the two science pieces up there with the cone and everything. We probably in the future should build our landers more wide as opposed to tall, and we've been building them tall, but wide is a very good way to do it. And it's really just an issue with basic philosophy of construction there, and I've been trying to go more wide with it. It's difficult when you design everything else vertically. So I'm gonna have to start thinking about that, especially going into Project Destiny. I want to be able to build things a lot more efficiently, because I want to test them, get the test craft back, so I'm restoring some of the funds lost if that's a thing, and if it isn't, it should be modded in, because I think that would be really sweet. And then use the craft after making some modifications and actually doing a mission with it. So I want to kind of build more wide in the philosophy of all of our building, as far as that's concerned. But you can see pretty clearly that in the distance where we're gonna be landing more than likely is where it starts getting pretty bumpy. And if we were doing this on the dark side of the planet, it would be nigh impossible to tell if we were actually going to land on a mountain or on a mountainside or in a valley. And the height meter, being able to see how many meters above the surface you are, can be a little deceiving when you're landing in a deep valley or on a tall mountain. If you're landing on a tall mountain that's 4,000 meters above the typical surface of the planet, then where you think you have 4,000 meters still to slow down, you're going to hit a mountain, and you see it coming up like pretty much at the last minute here. And overall, we actually make this slowdown approach super efficient. We started at full burn right when we needed to on accident. It was a kind of a guess, and it almost seems like at one point that we're not going to slow down enough. And if you are landing efficiently with how you're burning, you will notice that is a common feeling going towards the surface. Like right now, you're like, oh, we are going way too quick. We're not going to slow down in time. This is going to be a giant explosion. But you got to remember, as you get slower and as you burn more, you're going to obviously have more time before you hit the surface. There is a cutoff point to that where you are going to hit the surface going too quickly. You just need to kind of gauge where that's at. And this is something you could do easily with math, but if you're not willing to sit there and figure that out, the best way to do it is just by feel, and you'll get this by usually just playing a lot. Also, it's probably worth noting that some of these valleys are deep enough that they get really dark when you're on the sun rising or setting part of the planet of Moho. You'll notice that, if the sun is setting behind a mountain, it'll get dark really across the shadow of that mountain, and it makes it very hard to see where you're landing within that valley. So that's another issue you can have on some planets, not all. A lot of moons that have super deep surfaces are like that. Which is the moon for Eve? Oh gosh, Gilly, I think is what it is. That one has some really deep... That's a really small moon, by the way, but it has some very deep surfaces on it, and that's another really hard one to land on. In fact, Gilly is difficult because its rotation speed is quite high, so you are very easily, getting onto it. It doesn't take a lot of slowing down to slow down to the point where you're gonna land. You can be not even bursting at all with any of your engines and be falling at like 5 meters a second. And as you see here, we're trying to go like under 10 if we can by the time we hit the surface. But it's difficult with Gilly because the surface is moving quicker underneath you than you typically are going straight up and down, so that's a hard one to land on if you're not experienced with that. However, this site is glorious. You have the sun just casting a great shadow, on some of these mountains, and the really nice look of everything, and we're gonna have a fairly soft landing. It's gonna be a little bit of a jolt, and because once again I build my craft tall instead of wide, which is a fundamental issue, it may look like we're going to kind of get knocked over here. I should burst once I'm about to hit, but we did it, and no damage done, which is the most important part. That again is why we built our landing struts the way we do. It just simply makes it so that those engines aren't going to clonk against the ground, even if there is a rise in the terrain. Now, we want to bring our solar panels out, and we did that because, we don't want our craft running out of power, just in case, whilst we're doing our stuff. We do all of our science stuff here, get as much as we can. We did some while we were landing, when we were getting closer to the surface, because you get, certain stuff with that. But we could do like our gravitron, we could send out our mission reports. We can send out some of the data that we can't resend, which, we only have 1 or 2 maybe of the stuff. We could send that stuff out. But for the most part, I'm currently a little concerned about how much fuel we have. I don't think we have enough to get back. I'm concerned if we have even enough to get back into orbit of Moho. We will definitely find out as we move along here, but what we're trying to do currently is just get as much science as we can, focus at the job at hand. Like I said, in the previous episode, it's not letting me do the nose cone thing. I don't know why it did previously. I don't know what broke it, so I'm going to have to figure that out sometime between this week and next week. But it's time to actually EVA and get out on the surface. However, I am a little silly in realizing that I don't have a ladder. So I'm just gonna have to fall. Sorry, little Kerman. I just think you're as much as I want you to, you're gonna take a little bit of a spill. But he doesn't fall over, which is good. He'll do that later. Right now, I'm kind of looking like, I want to move the flag. Let's think realistically here. I want to move the flag away from faceplant, totally face planting. I want to move the flag away from the craft because realistically speaking, if you put it down right next to it and then you took off, the force from pushing the dust and stuff away from the craft as you were launching would actually knock over the flag. So you want to have it a little bit of a distance away, right? I mean, that makes sense. But obviously, Kerbal Space Program doesn't really render the physics on the flag anyways, aside from the waving of it, but I'm pretty sure that's just animated more than it is anything else. But this is our first landing, and we hope we can get back. We hope we can come back here and get even more science. I'm not too sure how much or how many biomes Moho has. Probably not many. The moon itself actually has a lot of biomes. I've mentioned this before. It's worth it sending something back to the moon and getting all the stuff from the biomes, because you can get several thousand science out of stuff like that. But I don't think we're going to be doing that with this kind of craft. We could definitely get to the moon and back with this sucker. This thing's got a lot of power, but getting to Moho and back is a little bit more difficult. So what we have to do here, because we don't have a ladder, is we have to boost our way up and not clock ourselves in the head with our SAS. That was bad. Okay, let's try this again. We're gonna go straight up, and we want to grab on perfectly, just like that. And with that, we're already leaving. I know that my poor Kerbal probably wants to stay a little longer. He wants to admire the scenery, and when we have the mods to habitat these planets, to basically put down bases on them, right? We will do that, and we'll have Kerbal stay quite a long time on moon bases and you know, like planet bases for Duna and Eve, which would be a lot of fun to be able to do that kind of stuff. However, you know, we don't have the time. We gotta get back to Kerbin. But now I know, after taking off and seeing just how much thrust I can get with these engines and everything, that this is just not going to happen. I really should have planned some type of Apollo mission and done it a lot better than what I did, which, as I mentioned before, is having a space station around Kerbin, which I refuel with, which we had before. I don't know why I stopped using that. To refuel at that space station without getting rid of any of the major stages on those orange rockets, refuel them all back up to full, and then go all the way here, ditch that, right, so undock from it, land with this lander we have, go back up into orbit of Moho, get into the same inclination and orbit, you know, just a slightly bigger orbit or wider orbit than our engines, redock with that and take us back to Kerbin. That would be the ideal way of doing it. I just didn't. So now we know, you know, now we know for our dress mission and even some of the missions to the moons within the Joule system. That's a little bit more difficult to do because it's really hard to orbit around a single moon there. You kind of want to hit them as you go. So you want to have a very efficient lander for that, and we'll come up with something to do that with. But you know, skipping along here, I get up into orbit, really nothing too crazy. Some cool shots of the sun once again, and just kind of having the sunlight bounce off the surface of the planet. But what I'm doing here is I'm making myself a good orbit. The best way to salvage this mission right now is to get myself into a good, stable orbit, hopefully on the same plane as Kerbin would be, or close to it. So I want it kind of level with the sun's plane, even though the planet itself has a weird inclination to it within its orbit around the sun, which makes it very difficult, obviously, to get back to Kerbin to begin with, and you want to launch at a certain time there in order to get back efficiently. But what we're trying to do here is just set up the perfect orbit around this planet, because we know we're not getting back, which means we have to send a rescue mission. I'm not going to leave this poor Kerbal here. I need to send a rescue mission. So we don't need a lander with this rescue mission. We just need an efficient spaceship to get here and back, which means we're probably going to have to do a refueling mission. This kind of depends on when patch 0.24 is going to come out. If it comes out early, then we may not get around to doing all of that. If it comes out later, then we'll probably do all that and get this Kerbal back. But it would be cool to see him get back with all of this science, because what you can do is you can get him out of the ship, you can grab all the science out of the pod, and you can transfer it over to the other ship and then take off. So what does this mean? What do I have to do as far as that ship design is concerned? Well, if I have a command pod that has multiple seats in it, which I will make, then what I need to make sure is that I keep somebody from coming on to that mission. So I only, like, say I have 3 seats on that mission, I will only fill 2 of those. That way this guy can get back just fine, right? Otherwise, he's going to be holding on to the ladder, and that may not work as far as re-entry is concerned. Depending on how I re-enter, actually, that may, you may be able to figure something out like that, especially if it was a shuttle type design. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do just a basic rocket and a lot of power to slow down, get into orbit, get close enough that I can transfer my Kerbal, which means not only, if you remember correctly how I came in the last time, where it had like a weird inclination to it, or a plane, you know, it's a really eccentric plane to it, I'm going to have to make sure I match planes with this one. I could have kept the plane that I had, but I wanted to match planes with this one because that gets rid of one of the things I already have to do, which is create a better plane change for when I go and do my my return to Kerbin with my rescue mission. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making a large orbit, which is going to make it easier for me to, you know, time warp and stuff and really get the docking. I won't even dock. I'll just get close enough where I can transfer my Kerbin or my Kerbal. I keep doing that. But I want to make sure that this orbit is good. So that's what we're doing now. We're getting it circularized, which again makes it a lot easier on me. But overall, this poor Kerbal is going to have to sit here and just enjoy chilling in space. With the new mods that we're going to be running with the life support systems, we may not be able to actually do this kind of thing in the future. The Kerbal will eventually die if we don't give him enough food and water and oxygen and all that. So we'll still see if we're going to be using that mod or not when we get into the next series, but may as well transfer over anything that I can right now, you know, like my crew reports and stuff like that. That way I have less data that I'm pulling over, which won't make too much of a difference. But because I have these amazing solar panels and this actually really well-designed ship, our Kerbal should be fine. So with that, we can actually go back to the Space Center and we can unlock some stuff. I'm not going to unlock anything too crazy here. We don't have a lot of science, but we're just going to unlock some things that I think may be useful for our next mission or future missions, rather. And, you know, nothing, like I said, nothing too crazy. If we had like 1,000 science, I may have gone a little bit crazier with it and designed a super awesome ship, but I just didn't have enough. So we need to make sure we get that poor Kerbal back home to his family, because I'm sure they're wondering exactly what he's doing floating around Moho, which is closest to the sun. I mean, he may come back with a tan. Most Kerbals are green. He may come back a little more, you know, like brownish. I don't know what's the tan version of green. It would be just like a darker green, wouldn't it? Who knows? Either way, if you've liked this new style of commentary, let me know. I'm not too sure about it. I don't really like it as much, I think, as the snap cuts. I think I like that a lot better. It takes a little bit more editing, but I think it's overall more enjoyable to watch. But I'm curious what you guys think. With that, though, we'll be back next week with more Kerbal Space Program, and we'll see you guys next time.